Hello from San Francisco. I'm Patrick McGee, tech correspondent for the Financial Times, and I'm here with Kyle Vogt, chief executive of Cruise, a company that is actually got a driverless service for ordinary people operating in San Francisco. Not really another company that can say that, so we're delighted to have him here. And let's talk about what that actually means, what the last few years have brought, how we even got here, and what it means for developing technology over the next 5 to 10 years. You know, it's a difficult place to have a lead, difficult place to ensure that lead and to maintain it. So Kyle's the man to ask, and let's jump into it.
Well, thanks for having me, Patrick. Where do you want to start?
Actually, I want to start with something funny, which is that just a couple of weeks ago, you had this viral moment, right, where a Cruise autonomous car late at night in San Francisco was pulled over by the police. Some of our audience might not be familiar with that because they're in the UK, they're in Europe, and I don't know to what extent the news made it over there. But it was just one of those like, oh my gosh, this is actually a real technology where something like that's going to take place and people are filming it. I imagine it's not the first time it's actually been pulled over by a car. Maybe it's the first time it's just been filmed and uploaded by someone with enough followers for us all to notice. But did you learn anything from that episode? Like, what did it mean to you, and how did you find out about it? Let's just hear the story from your perspective.
Yeah, well, as you said, a lot of people heard about this, and it's not the first time a curious police officer has pulled over an AV just to interact with it and see, whether it responds to flashing lights. And that's what happened here. If you think about it, to put a driverless AV on the road, it doesn't just have to drive, but it has to handle interactions with police officers and first responders. And so in this case, the AV did what it was supposed to do. It pulled over when a police officer turned on their flashing lights. And I think what caught people's attention is, first of all, this was captured on camera by an observer, and they added some commentary like, oh, look, the police officer is walking over to this car. There's no one in it. And it also looked like the police officer, appeared to pull out their baton, which in hindsight looks kind of silly because there was literally no one in this car. It wasn't even carrying a passenger. And the police officers were doing their job, a lot of respect for them. And I think, handled the situation admirably. And the AV, of course, after the police officer walked away, thought it was free to go and took off, and then pulled over again at the next across the intersection once the police officer turned their lights on. But it looked to the casual observer like the AV was running away from the police. And, that went viral. It was interesting. And I think it's just one of many examples of new and novel interactions between people and these machines that's happening for the first time now that they're being deployed in a major city.
Yeah. All right, cool. So yeah, I'm happy to hear that story from your perspective. All right, let's talk about why 2022 is, I think, by far the most pivotal, most exciting year for Cruise on record. Yeah, I'll let you tell the audience why.
Well, I think for us, I've been working on Cruise for 8 years, and it's kind of like an iceberg. The majority of the work and the effort that has gone into launching a driverless service has been below the surface. And now in 2022, the tip of the iceberg is just peeking out, and you get to see this like incredible amount of work that's been happening to get to the point where you can operate a service. And, technically in November 2021 was my first ride, anyone's first ride in a driverless car in a major city. And then in 2022, we've been scaling up the fleet, and then we open it up to members of the general public. So right now in San Francisco, there's a wait list. After you get off that wait list, we have an app that looks very similar to a ride-hail app, and you can request a driverless car. It shows up with nobody inside, no safety driver, no nothing, pulls over for you, gets in, and takes you to your destination. And it's just mind-blowing for people. It's a magical experience. It feels like, the first time you used an iPhone, or like, waiting in line a long time to see the first Star Wars movie or something like that. It's just a moment that is really meaningful. And I think people are shocked how it feels like the future, but also how normal it feels even after a few minutes of driving.
And I think just days ago, is it doubled the geofence, the area in which you operate in within San Francisco?
Yeah, I mean, again, like driverless cars in a major city, there's a lot of things that potentially could be weird or interesting or difficult about that. And so we've taken a gradual build-up approach, and we started with a small portion of the city. And we just announced, I think it was yesterday, now that it's almost 70% of the city. And so, for most users, they now have the ability to go anywhere in the entire city of San Francisco in a driverless car. Now, it's still limited in hours operation, but you're going to see those hours of operation expand throughout the year as well. But this is just more evidence that not only are driverless cars here, but it's not just one or two. It's going to be many of them, and in a larger and larger service area.
Yeah, let's talk about the hour. So what is it, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., something like that?
Yes.
And who decides in a sense? Is it a matter of Cruise's comfort with its own technology to expand the hours to 24/7? Is it up to the regulators? It's sort of carte blanche here, right? Or uncharted territory. Is it a negotiation? Like, who determines that?
Well, there are a lot of factors at play. I think ultimately we want to make sure when we deploy a service, we do it right. And that could mean the safety is at a target level of performance. It could mean our operational capability is sufficient to support that number of vehicles out there driving around, picking people up. And it also means that we have good interactions with obviously law enforcement, first responders, and that our vehicles aren't causing any weird traffic situations or other things. And so naturally, you want to start in the hours of the day that have the least traffic and congestion. And as things match expectations and we optimize any sort of processes or make technical changes or product changes, we'll expand the hours of operation. And so, 2022, if you look at where we were in January, you see that's a very small deployment, very small number of cars. You look at where we are now, and it's like, okay, that's kind of interesting. There's like a lot of people using this thing, and it's a good portion of San Francisco. At the end of the year, I think it's going to be, a different story. And then, of course, this is all in the duration of 1 year, yet Cruise has been working on driverless cars for 8 years. So really, this is going from like zero to full scale urban operation, essentially in the course of a year. And I think that's going to catch a lot of people by surprise, just how quickly it went from, oh, I heard about the first driverless car to now they're everywhere.
I want to get to international in a second, but in terms of North America alone, or I suppose probably US alone, is there already a second city lined up that beyond San Francisco where you'll be offering your service?
Well, yeah, so we're going to be in lots of cities in the future, but that's, expanding to new cities is not the hard thing to do. The hard thing to do is actually to build a large fleet in one city and get to the point where people love it and use it all the time, and to the point where it's profitable. The technical barriers to go from one city to another, like we know how to do that. We operate in 3 different locations now. So, setting up what we've done in San Francisco in another city, especially if it's, of similar or less complexity in terms of the driving conditions, is not a big deal. But the thing that nobody has done yet is actually get, to product market fit, to get repeat power users loving the product, using it over and over in one city, and having it be the predominant form of transportation for those users. And so that's how we think about it. And we know that if we build something that really resonates with people and they're using it again and again, then that's a success that we can replicate in more cities, not just operations that we can replicate in more cities.
How do you compare that challenge, that like meeting customer demands, actually operating the service versus developing the technology so the thing drives itself?
They're very different problems, and in fact, in many ways, they're very fun to work on because some of the things that matter to customers are purely dependent on how the car drives, like the technology. Does it drive smoothly? Does it pull over in the right spot? But a lot of it is more of the softer interactions. Like, does the car make me feel safe? Does it give me the right audio cues? Is it clear in the app how I enter or tell the AV where to go? If I change my mind and want to go to a new spot, is that interface seamless? Well, those are all the touch points with a user that matter for generating a really good product experience. And so, for the last several years, we've been focused almost entirely on how the AV drives because that was the bottleneck to deployment. Now that we're deployed, the next bottleneck is reaching product market fit. And so, our attention is shifting more to the overall user experience and not just the technical capabilities of the vehicle.
So are you able to say how many Cruise vehicles are there in San Francisco, testing or otherwise?
We have 2 fleets we run. One is a supervised fleet, and we drive that all over the city to collect data, find interesting edge cases, and test out new versions of software. And then we have our driverless fleet, which, as it sounds like, has nobody in it, any of these cars. And these are the ones we kick on at night, and they go out over the city, waiting for people to request them and pick up rides. And at the beginning of the year, that was 2 vehicles. Now it's dozens that are operating every night concurrently. And we anticipate that'll be a much larger number as we get closer to the end of the year. But just for perspective, around 10 p.m., when the service goes live, we have multiple parking lots in the city of San Francisco that are filled with driverless cars. Every single stall is taking. At 10 o'clock, they start lining up in a queue and they shoot out one after the other from this, we call it a launch lane, into the streets of San Francisco. And so if you walk by these parking lots at 10 o'clock, they're completely full. You walk by them at 10:15, they're empty. That entire parking lot of vehicles is now driving around the city, optimizing for where people like to get picked up, and serving rides for passengers. It's pretty cool to see that not just one or two AVs operating without a driver, but a whole fleet, and doing it, sort of in perfect harmony, and as this orchestra of vehicles out there in the city serving customers.
And so, I mean, really, the first company to do this in a really dense urban setting. So, what are some of the lessons that you've learned? Like anything unexpected that you've learned in real life deployment that just isn't possible when it's when you've got two people in the car?
Yeah. So, I mean, the big thing is there's a lot of unknown unknowns when it comes to operations. We're now in this early commercialization scale of the business, and that means we're going to discover new challenges on the operations side and on the user experience side. There's when there's someone in the car, if you have an issue, you can just talk to the person behind the wheel and tell them what to do. So figuring out the equivalent for every possible thing that can go wrong for customers is new. But I'd say overall, the initial reaction, people are blown away. It's better than we could have ever imagined. There's this feeling of magic, like I'm part of the future. Delight when you see the steering wheel move and the car take off, and it just works. People are surprised by how much the AV can handle, and people are using it after they go out for dinner or have some drinks, or for socializing. The most popular thing people do, or one of the most popular things, is to go on a donut run. So they'll go to Bob's Donuts on Polk Street in San Francisco in the middle of the night, or visit friends. And some interesting interactions we've had. People fall asleep. The rides are so smooth, they're out late at night. And we've actually had one passenger who's a repeat snoozer multiple times, has fallen asleep in an AV, gotten to the destination, and our customer support has had to wake them up.
So do you have people like night nurses that are, literally every night they got off at 2 a.m. or what have you, and are taking the cruise home?
We have a lot of regular users. We partnered also with UCSF, and they have nighttime. I think they're students who take the service, on a pretty regular basis. And so, we've started trying to find pockets of users that really benefit from the service, even though it's only operating currently overnight. And another example that's been, we've been really surprised by how much people like it, is women who are traveling at night, especially if they're coming home from dinner or something else late. After dinner or drinks or night of socializing, you want to head home. And a lot of women, previously in the city would take a ride-hail company because it's easier than finding parking, and you don't have to worry about driving under the influence. But the last thing they want to do after that is get into a car with a stranger. Yeah. But you don't really have a choice in that circumstance. And what that is, if you think about it, is sacrificing your personal feeling of safety for convenience. And we're solving that. That shouldn't be the case.
It was my wife's first comment when we did a driverless test together. I'm curious. That's actually one good answer, but I think there are multiple, I hope there are multiple. For someone that has the option, it's 2 a.m. They're off their shift. They're already embedded in the Cruise app, and they know the vehicle can come to them. What keeps them using Cruise versus just hailing an ordinary Uber?
Well, I mean, anecdotally, like I look at my phone a lot. I'm doing emails and things while I'm in the backseat of a car, whether it's a ride-hail company or a Cruise AV, and I get motion sickness. I can't do that for more than 5 or 10 minutes in the back of most ride-hail cars, and some of the drivers are just really, heavy-footed. The simplest way to put it. The Cruise AV, the acceleration and deceleration profiles have been optimized to minimize motion sickness, and so you'll actually feel it. You can actually be on your laptop doing work, or on your phone reading emails. Or just generally, if you're sensitive to motion sickness, you don't feel that. It's this consistent, smooth ride that people are really surprised by. And I think once you realize that's an option and it's consistent and reliable, it's going to be, I think it's going to be annoying to have to go back to a car where you don't have that consistent, smooth experience.
Let's talk about international. So you have this deal with Dubai, which is not only the first international market for Cruise to go to, but it's also not with the cruises that we see in the streets of San Francisco. It's with the Origin. Maybe we'll throw up a picture, but do you want to tell us what the Origin is for anyone who doesn't know, and then describe, how feasible is it that there's going to be Origin vehicles in Dubai in 2024, if I'm getting all the facts straight?
Yeah, well, I mean, stating the obvious, if you have a car that doesn't need a driver, then you probably also don't need the steering wheel and pedals. And you probably also don't need to all face forward, to look out the front windshield as you would if you're a driver. So we built a new vehicle called the Origin, which fixes all that. It's actually designed for connecting people who ride in a car together. So there's seats that face each other. It's an enormous cabin, lots of legroom, lots of personal space. So it makes sense whether you're traveling alone or eventually in the future in a pooled ride where there may be other people that you're riding with. And I think it's really like, what you'd imagine if you were imagining the future of transportation in a world where we live with driverless cars. These cars are safer, and it's a better experience. And so these are going to go online in Dubai as well as in the US, and as soon as we can do that. And we're pretty excited to see what this looks like, because this will be our first time deploying primarily these origin vehicles, these very futuristic vehicles in a market. We've done, our current vehicles in San Francisco, but Dubai will be the first where we're doing essentially exclusively origins. I think that's going to be really cool.
And it's probably worth knowing, GM creates the origin, right? They do all the manufacturing. You rely on them for that. Obviously, they're their chief investor, major partner. Do you want to talk about just that, but also there's more to the partnership with GM. I believe your technology will at some stage be used to, I don't know, what would you say? Not supplant Super Cruise, the other service from GM, but at some stage, these driverless vehicles built, specifically bespoke for ride hailing will, I believe, become available to people that are, purchasing the next Cadillac.
Yeah, it's only natural. So first of all, on the manufacturing side for the origins, a lot of companies have tried to figure out how to build electric cars at scale. It's even more complicated to manufacture AVs. And so we're really fortunate to have General Motors and all their electric vehicle manufacturing capabilities, the Ultium batteries, all that kind of technology that we can ride on the back of for building our AVs. We have enough problems in the technical and operations and product domain to solve that it's nice to have a really reliable manufacturing partner, and also one as a major investor. But then looking forward, it seems kind of obvious that once you ride in a vehicle like the ones we're using in San Francisco now, and realize that you no longer have to work for your car. You don't have to sit in the front seat and, either assist it or drive or turn the wheel or whatever. You can actually sit in the back seat and the car works for you. When that flips and people, flips around and people latch onto that and realize that this is something that's even an option to me, because it's not an option today, I don't think they're ever going to buy a car that doesn't have that capability. And so we want to take that out of the rideshare vehicles, the Origin and the Bolt vehicles we have in San Francisco, because we're aware of the fact that not everyone is going to be able to use a shared on-demand robotaxi for every part of their transportation needs. If you're going on a longer trip, or you're a tradesperson that keeps all your tools in the back of your truck or whatever it is, we want to be able to reach you with this technology and give you the benefits of that. So it's going to move beyond the shared robotaxis into vehicles you can go out and buy and own yourself. And we're going to do that as quickly as possible, and make that available for people. It's only natural.
The last decade of driverless car development has really been, full of hype with, certainly lots of progress. I'm not discounting that at all. But, anytime someone gave a real date as to when something was going to be sort of on the market, it came and went, with maybe a press release, but like not much, right? So I'm curious as to, why is the next 5 years going to look different? Like as you shift focus from the technological feat to the commercialization challenge, is it not possible that you're just hit with a whole set of challenges that just come to the fore and become more complicated than you thought, just as we experienced in the first decade?
Yeah, so the hype around the technology can be like a pendulum. It gets ahead of where the technology is sometimes, and sometimes it's actually behind. Like you can have a hype cycle crash and people get very pessimistic about something. I think that's what's happened with AVs. I actually think the pendulum has swung back towards pessimism. And even though there's a real driverless robotaxi service operating in San Francisco, people are almost denying it out in the open. It's like a denier of AVs, like they don't exist, even though they do. And so I think what's going to happen in the next 5 years going forward is you have to realize that, getting to the point where you can have a driverless AV at all requires a mountain of work. You can't launch it when it partway works or is almost working. You have to wait till it really works. But once it works, there are very few barriers to duplicating that in more cities or making it operate in more volume. There's a lot of work on the operational and product side to scale up those things, but that's not a lot of science or really complicated technical risk. It's execution. And that's something that we can control, and it's easier to estimate in terms of timing and to forecast. Whereas, the last 10 years have been about more pure R&D and reducing science risk. And that is much harder to accurately predict.
At what stage? I mean, I don't think this technology is ever going to be like full on plug and play, where you sort of download it and it goes to a city it's never been in and just works. But as
Why
close
not?
as we can get to that, where like you're in
Yeah,
a new
pretty close.
city that you've never done any testing in, you drop a fleet in. How many weeks? Maybe it's like a month of mapping. Let's say, if I'm just sort of giving a hypothetical figure, at what point are we getting to a stage where you can enter a new city without years of testing and it's ready within a reasonable time frame?
It's interesting. A lot of people ask that question, but for me, it's almost ironic because it's like not going to be the bottleneck for us. Like the bigger bottleneck is once this works and we want to start ramping up manufacturing, how quickly can we do that? Or how quickly can we set up the infrastructure to charge and service and maintain vehicles in new cities? Those are actually the biggest bottlenecks. Once you have the software at a point where these driverless vehicles can work, the adaptations to work in a new city are actually, I'd say like less than 3% of the technical challenge to actually build a driverless AV in the first place. So we're excited about being in new cities. The technical challenge is relatively small. It's more about just spinning up, business operations in those cities. That's going to take, I think, the most energy for us.
Right. Okay. If I'm to end this and the time has flown by, on a personal note, I'm in Outer Sunset, San Francisco. I see a lot of cruise vehicles testing here. I don't think we're at the stage where it's at nighttime and I might, have to look out for one. And Financial Times is in downtown, the financial district. At what stage might I be commuting 9 a.m. in a driverless vehicle to get to work, 5 p.m. on the way back?
Well, I'm going to stick to our recent trend of under promise and over deliver. So I'll just say soon and leave it at that for now.
Is it not, now you can't give, is it this calendar year? Let me ask that.
Likely, very likely.
Really? Okay. I mean, that would be amazing. All right, Kyle, I'll give you the last word. Is there anything else that's just, just going on that you're desperate to talk about, but I failed to ask?
I don't think so. I mean, I guess the last thing I'll say is that this is a pivotal moment for the AV industry, going from no real driverless cars to having it operate in a major city. And it's going to be really fun. It's fun for all of us. This is the future we've all knew was coming. It's actually starting to appear. And I think it's really great to see everyone as excited as we are for this to be happening, for the first time in a major city. So thank you to all of you who have gone on rides or will go on rides in the months to come. We're very excited to be doing this with you.
Great. Well, look, I hope it all works out. That would be amazing. Certainly, I would love to, have my iPhone out and take a fully driverless road all the way to work. And if so, then we'll talk about it next time you're at Future of the Car. So big thanks to Kyle. And that's it for me from Patrick in San Francisco.